Good afternoon, Chawla sir.
Good afternoon, Gurpreet. कैसे हैं आप? Missed you last time you were not there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Last time I missed the class. Sir.
I know. So Punjab is voting today.
Yes, sir. Today Punjab is voting.
Yes, and it is hot across the country. They are saying Nagpur, the temperature is reaching 56, which I
Re-
thought was a little, terrible,
Sir.
but that's the way it is. Global warming is definitely happening.
Really, sir? 56?
They said 56.
Very
Like, for
strange.
example, Delhi, they said 52.3 at
Okay,
one
sir.
of the observatory.
Sir.
It is very hot. It is burning if you go outside.
Sir, we are live now, and
Okay,
you are
perfect.
you are the host.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's start. If others join, they can join in between. Uh, just a minute. Let me share my PPT, and I think I need to. Can you see the slide,
Yes,
guys?
sir.
Okay. Can you see the slide move? Can you see the slide moving? No.
No.
Okay. This one. Let me. In fact, I got it. I don't want a. Okay, that's how it works. Okay, can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about mobility today, and in fact, the term mobility in itself conveys nothing, and it conveys everything. And then the first question comes that why are we studying mobility separately when a migration is a form of mobility? So as we go on, you will get to understand why mobility we are talking about. In fact, there is a whole new subject which has dwelled out of mobility, which is called mobility studies. So now we have migration studies, and there is a separate unit which teaches mobility studies. And you will understand in this unit why we do that. In fact, a part of this PPT that I have made, I have taken from other sources. Your SLM was not very clear in terms of making this clear in terms of migration and mobility. So that's the thing I have. As usual, I'll start with by saying that you can stop me at any moment of time to ask a question, clarification, or to share something that you would like to share. B, there is no right, wrong, good, bad, or ugly in academics. These are perspectives, and each perspectives have each individual who gives a perspectives, I will try and quote that person or cite that person. Okay, to start with, I came across this very interesting central list of OBC Muslims for the state of Gujarat. We have been talking about castes, and we have seen and we have talked about it that castes today in India span across religions, across regions. In fact, when Indians travel abroad, they migrate, they become diaspora, they carry their caste identity with them. So if you see, there are so many castes, Muslim castes, which are under the OBC list in the state of Gujarat. In fact, there has been a lot of debate in terms of reservations and removal of reservations in this particular election. It's whenever something is talked a lot, it's always good because multiple perspectives come. People are able to take views, stances, make opinions, and so on and so forth. In fact, in serial number 7, central list number 26 is Hingora, and I was just reading about Hingora. Hingoras are, Sindhi Muslims. So we have Aisha who was talking about how they are Sindhis and they are Muslims. Very interesting way. And when we get into the study of caste and region by region, we'll find it, there is a whole lot of stuff which is happening. So I thought, let me share this with you. So, objectives of the SLM, what is mobility? Mobility among Indian diaspora, how mobility occurred in various segments. I have a case study of Fiji, what is given in the unit. Let's start with mobility. It can apply to any individuals, community, or the whole system. At any moment of time, or if you see the whole history of human beings as well as the history of the planet, everything is in motion. The weather is in motion, the water is in motion, the planet is in motion, the universe is in motion, everything is in motion. Migration itself is a movement from one location to another, maybe result of aspiration, push and pull factors. So let's start with the definition. I always start with the definition. Mobility definition, quality of state of being mobile or movable. In fact, with mobility comes additional terms of immobility and motility, the capability of being in motion. So, and inevitably, the thing what happens in migration, we tend to look at migration as a bodily movement, the movement of bodies. But what happens to everything around the body in terms of ideas, in terms of objects, in terms of identities? More often than not, migration studies are not able to go deep into all these extra factors. And that's why a whole subject has come about, which is called mobility studies. The quality of state of being mobile, ability or capacity to move, to change one's social or socioeconomic position in a community. So obviously, there is a lot of sociology which comes into this because it is a social thing. Migration definitions: to move from one country, place, or location to another, past usage. So migration also is, for example, in the computer terminology, to relocate information from storage or operation on one computer to another computer. That also is migration, to change position. So that is how mobility and migration are defined. In fact, I got this, this graphic in terms of types of migration to give you a recap. And for people who have just joined, as to what is the kind of types of migration. There is regular, there is involuntary, there is undocumented. IDPs, internal displaced people. What happens today in this country because of unemployment, because of lack of economic opportunities? There's a huge amount of IDPs which is happening. And we got a sense of IDPs when during COVID, the whole country stopped. And then these migrants did not know what to do, these internally displaced people. And they all started walking back. What we called at that time, the lockdown happened, and suddenly a lockdown was declared with no understanding as to what would happen to these IDPs, internally displaced people. In fact, the other day there was this, this daily wager mystery who had come to do work in my house. So I said, "Where are you from?" His residence was on the Bengal-Bihar border, but because of the river swallowing his whole village, he had moved into Bihar in Purnia. He was actually a Bengali living in Bihar. So IDPs, trafficked, abducted, asylum seekers, then there are undocumented. And if you see on the right side, migrants on tourist visa or labor migration can overstay and slip into undocumented status. Then there are, of course, deportees who are forced to go back or assisted voluntary returns. So this is the United Nations Mobility and Migration infographic. This is available on the net. If you search for it, you can get it. And as I keep saying, if you want the PPT, just write me a email on. I will share my email ID. That's my email ID. If you write an email on that, I can send you the PPT. Okay, so as I said, there's a whole new subject called mobility studies. Is the emergent interdisciplinary field, explain the dynamic relation between combined movement of bodies, objects, and ideas. Because remember, it's not just the bodies which move. There are a whole lot of the bodies, there is an identity, there are ideas, and the body moves with objects. So this is mobility studies. across space with the more expansive, if amorphous term mobility has its emerged in the last 20 years to encompass the movement of people, things, objects, technologies, and infrastructures. A little bit more on the mobility studies. In fact, this becomes a very important subject in today's time and age, considering what all is happening in the world. The wars, the climate change, the opportunities with technology, and so on and so forth. Migration studies emphasizes the quantitative movement of people across political boundaries, excludes the dynamic relation between the movement of people, objects, and ideas, or any considerations of power or discourses. That's where migration studies, the new term or the new subject, interdisciplinary subject of mobility studies came about. The definition of migration studies itself has expanded to consider whether certain movements are voluntary or involuntary. It's still unable to interrogate who and what is demobilized and remobilized across different scales and spaces, and the interconnectedness of mobility and motility. Motility is the capability of mobility, but the person is not mobile right now. So, for example, in the case of Philippines, the care drain, or Philippines has a very large population of women who migrate for caregiving, which is the term is called care drain for Philippines. Now, when these women move, there is a
Sir, you are not audible now.
I think there is some technical error. We can wait for a minute. Let me contact to Abhay sir once more.
Okay, sir.
Sorry, guys. The light went off and the net collapsed. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Guys,
sir.
can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Guys, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Let me restart. Firoz, can you give me host again? Firoz, are you there? Okay, I'm the host now. Perfect. Let me give me a sec, please. I have to.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
can you see my PPT? Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear my voice? Is it audible?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, Shilpa says yes. Thanks, Shilpa. Okay, so there is this paper by Nicholas on mobility, immobility, and migration. I picked out of that. That paper is also there on the net. If you Google search, you can get that paper. So he is giving examples of the invasion of Ukraine and COVID-19 pandemic. E- Each offering, it is just a minute. It's saying my internet is unstable. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, sir.
Guys, okay, okay. I just got a message, my internet is unstable. So he's giving an example of Ukraine war and COVID-19. So in Ukraine war, because of the attack, Ukrainians moved. Now there is a mobility, but that mobility is not migration in a way, and they are moving back and forth. In fact, a lot of people went across the border, but a lot of people went internal in terms of mobility. And similarly with COVID-19 pandemic, in fact, we will have an example of how he defines mobility, immobility, and migration. Entangling migration with more recent way of conceiving mobility in the 21st century. Now, in this only, he calls about social mobility, calls attention to inequality, status, power, and hierarchy within nation states. As I've been speaking over a period of time in terms of identity and the social stratification that we talked about, each society has a stratification. In fact, nature is made hierarchical. Nothing, and every time we conceive of the fact that the country is uniform, the religion is uniform, the caste is uniform, the religion is uniform, nothing is uniform. They are all, there is a social hierarchy, there is a social stratification, there is inequality in terms of status, power, and hierarchy within every community. Focuses on social opportunity to transform individual, family, and group social and economic within social stratification system. In fact, mobility has been used historically by people and by communities to change their social status. And we will see how as we go across. Social mobility often focuses on intergenerational progress. Inevitably, the people who went outside a country, whether it was India or anything, went because of an aspiration or because of an opportunity. And that aspiration and opportunity made them change their social status. Migration and ethnic studies, sociology has been particularly focused on these opportunity studies to assess the degree of upward mobility for migrants and a racialized group through conceptions such as assimilation and integration. Inevitably, people move to make a better life. And that's why I said the history of human being is a history of mobility, of migration, and so on and so forth. So, for example, in the context of a pandemic, a social mobility lens in migration studies highlights the fact that despite cessation of movement for many across borders and within jurisdiction, there was a social inequality. For example, medical workers, delivery workers, supermarket, warehouse had to work. They just did not have the luxury of work from home. And they had to go out and work in a biohazard condition. And then they had to come back into the same small house where other people of the family stayed. They had to be mobile. Many returned to live with their apartment, Whereas middle class knowledge workers work from home and even more privileged escape to country houses to reinforce an unequal experience with this bio threat. So look at this mobility aspect. Pandemic allows us to see both the persistent limits and inequality of social mobility and the ways in which mobility understood more recently is an all-encompassing paradigm to observe and analyze spatial and temporary movement of things, people, logistics, and structures, how they intersect. So that's how why a separate unit on mobility has been given. I'm not delving deep into the mobility aspect, but that way you will be able to understand why mobility is a separate unit under migration studies. Because remember, mobility also encompasses not just the bodies, but the ideas, objects, technology, etc., etc. So, for example, during colonization, identity and movement. So, under this particular, I was reading this article. Uh, so, when the employment incentivized pattern of movement were established during the European colonization of Africa. Now, was this movement of bodies just a movement of bodies, or was it a flow of goods? And the movement was bodies was just incidental because of the flow of goods. For many nations in the global south, migration to other parts of the continent still continue to depend on employment projects. So nations, in fact, states use statecraft to either allow mobility or make people immobile. So when the government of India decided to put a lockdown, they suddenly put a whole lot of internally displaced people immobile. But the point is, these people had not enough resources to feed themselves when they were immobile. And that is where the inequality was there, because the middle class who could work from home could not understand what these migrants were going through. So there is a lot, as you see, as we delve deeper into various subjects, we'll realize that there is an basic inequality, and the way we look at things can be in multiple planes. The narrow definition of migrant fails to acknowledge the impact of history on contemporary mobility. So inevitably today, when the West says immigrants are bad and we should stop immigration, we tend to forget the fact historically the West and the global North was the one which colonized the global South. Nobody invited them, but they colonized for resources or whatever may be the reason. And now the global South wants a piece of the cake or a piece of the action, because the fact is the global North has developed itself, whereas the global South has remained underdeveloped. For instance, a large portion of United States African diaspora is now traveling to African continent to reclaim their identity. However, the definition of migration understand this movement as many numbers of American citizens traveling to Africa for tourism, which is what I call perspectives. How do we look at various things? Which perspective are you looking at it from? Is this aspect coming out clearly to you people? Guys, are you able to comprehend this aspect that I'm talking about?
Sir, little clarification, please.
Please tell me. Ask me.
Sir, from the last 4 or 5 years, the number of students from Punjab after 10+2, they are going abroad.
Correct.
We call it as a mass migration.
Correct.
So the effects of social, economic, cultural, and demographic effects on Punjab.
Correct.
So mass migration is near to mobility or migration?
Sorry, mass migration?
Is near to mobility or it's a part of migration?
So see, again, migration is also mobility. Gurpreet, migration is mobility. But when we look at migration, we look at people moving, bodies moving.
Sure.
So when we look at the migration studies, we will look at people from Punjab or youngsters from Punjab, students from Punjab are migrating to, let's say, wherever they are migrating to, Canada, US, wherever it is. Mobility studies will look at further in terms of, see, mobility, migration is also mobility, so they are the same.
Sure.
But mobility study also looks at the fact that when they are migrating or when they are moving from Punjab to, let's, Canada,
Sure.
where are they moving from? Which area of Punjab? The Doab, the Malwa, which area? How, what kind of culture are they carrying? Are they carrying any objects with them? Is there and what are the socio-economic background conditions which is happening? So because of this migration, what is happening to the people who are left behind?
Absolutely,
That
sir.
all will come under mobility studies.
Correct, sir. Sir,
And-
little more. Most of them are selling their land also. For
Correct.
example, if
Correct.
a student is going after 10+2, so he will sell either 1 acre or 1.5 or 2 acres.
Correct.
So the family behind is lack of economic resources.
Correct.
After some time, they will also move. So
Correct.
economically, or if we are looking from the agriculture point of the view, the agriculture is also affecting in Punjab by way of this migration,
Correct.
because the land holdings are decreasing. The land is mostly mostly bought by the rich people.
Correct.
Those
Correct.
those are
Correct.
those are non-agriculture.
Correct.
So demographic effects are also there. So
Correct.
in the last year, the print media took many big case studies regarding the villages having locks in most of the houses.
Correct.
So some of the videos are also at YouTube.
Correct.
The migration affecting the Punjab villages.
Correct.
So mobility is studying in Punjab, or they're part of destination, or in Canada or Australia, where they're going.
So mobility will study total mobility and whatever is left behind.
Right.
Migration studies looks at where they are migrating, what are which area they are migrating, how. So mobility study over encompasses the migration studies. Though migration is so mobility is a part of migration. So again, look at this fact. When we look at sociology, in sociology there is a certain amount of psychology. That's why it is called inter-subject study of a particular thing, because
Right.
each subject is connected to each other. Every subject has multiple ways of interdependence. Now, these two subjects, more often than not, again, in terms of the researcher, they can extend their research, but mobility studies, as I said, also not only looks at mobility, but also looks at objects and the ideas.
Right, sir, got it.
Though in migration studies, also a researcher can extend this and say, I'm going to be studying more than that. Gurpreet, also understand that academics what do they do is they try and bring out these separate, silos to say,
Sure.
I'm an expert in mobility studies. A lot of time there's an overlap. There are no silos in it.
True, sir.
For example, I'll give you an example which you will understand. For example, in the role of police is law and order. But
Sure.
if there is a fire, the first thing people call is police. If there is a domestic dispute, the first thing people call is police. So police over encompasses every other function of every other department, irrespective of the fact that that's not their job.
True, sir.
Now a policeman can, overreach and try and solve a domestic dispute which he or she is not competent. That is typically in the social justice department.
Sure.
So similarly, migration studies and mobility studies have a lot of overlap, though definition-wise, migration only looks at how people are migrating, where they are migrating, what are the reasons of migrating, whereas mobility studies is looking at much more than that in terms of what are the conditions, how does it change the socio-economic conditions back home, What are the people staying behind? Is there a chain migration which happens, means one person goes, the family also goes behind? So वो academics में वो थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा overreach कर देते हैं और वो silos बना देते हैं. Gurpreet,
Right,
I
sir.
hope.
Got it, sir. Got it. Sorry, I
Okay.
took more time.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Thank you so
Is
much.
the migration of African diaspora to Africa only taking place from the US? So Shrestha, because during the slave trade, the Europeans had the biggest chunks of slaves were taken from Africa and taken to North and Latin America. Now there is a concerted move by Africa to try and get these people to come back. In fact, there's a lot of pitch which has been done by African countries to get this talent and these diasporas come back. There is if you see there's a whole lot of all these countries in Africa want this talent back to be able to get these people to come and develop the countries, their countries. So obviously it is from America, largely from America, though a lot of Africans are inevitably these movements will keep on happening. For example, I was reading this case in terms of El Salvador. Some of the Africans who had been taken during the slave trade still have certain traditions of Africa, which even the Africans have forgotten. So African country people are going into El Salvador to see what were their old, traditions and claim it back. Shrestha?
Okay, so that's very interesting. Can you share that? Is it a case study?
This El Salvador one?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I read it as a news item somewhere. Let me see. Why don't you just Google and say
Okay.
Africans in El Salvador? You
Okay,
might
sir.
come across one of these, news, and then you can share it in the group.
Okay. Okay. Perfectly. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So then there is another case study: government policy, legal status, and movement. Definition of migration fails to define the status of large population of refugees who have found a permanent way of living with their host country. Now, what do they? Are they migrants? Are they refugees? But these people seem to be staying in another country and have established a significant residential and business in that area. For example, in Nairobi, exiled Somalis. So migration studies is not able to handle this as to how to look at that, at what lens to look at that. Or for example, Afghani refugees in West Pakistan, Northwest Pakistan. And these people more often than not keep going back and forth. So for example, if Bangladeshis are coming into India in terms of mobility for petty jobs or something, these guys are going back and forth. So they are not migrants in the true sense of the word. For example, internally displaced people. So in fact, all these interstate migrants, a lot of them keep going back and forth. They are not permanently migrated, yet they are working in that particular state. So this will not, Gurpreet, this, for example, this will not come under migration studies, but mobility studies. How is this mobility happening? So more often than not, migration is a state of permanently going, whereas mobility in back and forth. Now with transnationalism, with people moving back and forth because of globalization, both these studies are kind of converging into each other. So let's now come back into the mobility part rather than explain the migration mobility. So there are three types of mobilities which we talk about: social mobility, economic mobility, and political mobility. Social mobility, one class or status to another. In fact, if you notice, in one of the units of religious identity, we talk about the Ramgadiyas. Ramgadiyas were carpenters from Punjab, who the British took to East Africa for a work. There they acquired a social mobility. And more often than not, social, economic, and political work in tandem. So they acquired economic mobility, they acquired a higher class of in terms of economics. Based on that, they acquired a social mobility because they said, and Ramgarhia being carpenters were lower caste. There they challenged the established Hindu order and got their caste on a higher pedestal. They started changing their names and put themselves on a higher caste. Now, these can be intergenerational or intragenerational or intergenerational. Social mobility is any change in social positions, such as occupational changes, where the person moves in up. Okay. So, irrespective of the fact these Ramgarhis were carpenters, they went there in Africa and improved their socio-economic position. Low economic class to a higher economic class. And that's what we looked at a whole lot of, for example, a whole lot of people who move to, let's say, US, UK, or various other countries go and improve their social mobility, their social order in the hierarchy. And social mobility can be horizontal social mobility or vertical social mobility. So horizontal is from one situation to another at the same level. So if a Mistri goes from here to the Gulf and remains a Mistri with the same social order, that's a horizontal social mobility. Whereas this Mistri, if he goes and becomes a contractor, now that's a vertical social mobility. Higher educational and becomes rich, moves upward in the social hierarchy. And that is why economic, more often than not, works in tandem with social, and social and economic leads, or it could also be the other way. For example, the Sikhs who went to Canada now have their own, they are a very potent political force in Canada, because Sikhs in Canada today are the largest Sikh population outside Punjab in India. 2.1% of Canada is Sikhs. So they have acquired this social, economic, and political force out there. In fact, your unit has a photographs of many Sikh politicians in Canada. Economic mobility, type of mobility described how someone economic well-being changes over time, depends on opportunity, neighborhood, city, or state. Also refer to change in economic outcomes for and more often than not, people move for improving their economic position. Political mobility, community involvement in decision making. I was giving an example of Canada. Indians have gone to South Africa and have become politically strong. For example, the whole concept of Mandal Commission and the coming of the OBCs into the political domain has been a political mobility. So today, the way, and I was seeing this report about how the UP elections this time is being fought on caste lines, and how one particular caste is pitted against another caste. So that is how it works. All these mobility is already directly or indirectly impacted by migration, migrate to other places or countries voluntarily due to career of a better opportunity, promote social, economic, and political mobility in the long run. Inevitably, there is a mobility. So there's a case study of the Fiji community. These Fijis were indentured laborers. The Girmitiyas arrived between 1879 1960. Remember, these Grimitiyas, a lot of them were forced, they were deceived, they were indentured, they were basically labor. Have a greater network in Pacific Rim, better global networks, rose from misery, poverty, and exploitation, transformed to an affluent communities. In fact, the Indian Fiji community they has gone through a lot. In fact, they have gone to a second or a third migration, because there was a major problem when Indian Fiji community acquired political power, which got into a problem with the local Fiji community. And subsequently, the Indian Fiji community started remigrating into the Pacific Rim of Australia, New Zealand, and other places. Migration from Fiji to Australia, New Zealand, and places became significant. Late 60s increased rapidly after Fiji's independence in 70, when there was this political strife which happened. Skilled professional to the Pacific Rim. formed distinct transnational diaspora abroad by late 1990s through large-scale immigration of third and fourth generation Girimitia populations. Of the twice vanished. So first they went from India into Fiji by the Britishers, and then subsequently they started feeling threatened in Fiji because of various political conditions. There was an army coup in Fiji. There was a Indian Fiji who became the prime minister, but was subsequently deposed, and then that's where Indian Fiji started leaving Fiji. The twice migrants and the thrice migrants, Fiji Indians to another country, chain diasporas are taken into the Fiji Indians are about 170,000 strong. The Fiji Indian student also constitute a significant number in the US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, India, and elsewhere. So this is how mobility of this poor, downtrodden community. In fact, the other day on Twitter, I was seeing somebody share a document of the first set of 200 indentured labor who landed in Trinidad. So that person had picked up that document from there. Indian diaspora in Mauritius is considered unique, currently made up of 68% of Mauritian population, transitioned their identity from endangered to dominant diaspora community by dominating the social, political, and cultural facets. Indian festivals are famous. Language, especially Hindi and Bhojpuri, have been a strong connection with Mauritius culture, literature, and value. So mobility leads to more often a change of status in terms of social, economic, and political. Malaysia has three main ethnic communities: Malayas, Chinese, and Indians. India is the third largest ethnic group after Malay and Chinese. They have overtaken by Malays and Chinese, but politically they have grown in importance. That's Malaysia. Increased presence of skilled migrant from India spread across sectors like IT, banking, migration from Indian communities from rural Malaysia to urban Malaysia. So Indian communities are there in rural Malaysia as well as urban Malaysia. Mobility, Indian diaspora post-independence. In fact, we had seen in the last unit how there were these three layers of migration: the old, the new, and the newer. The pattern of emigration often described as brain drain, with mobility essentially voluntary and mostly individual. Emigrant population enjoying economic prosperity and social cultural right. In fact, the Indian American population, the diaspora population, is now phenomenal on the landscape in terms of political. The US Vice President is an Indian American. The emigration of skilled and unskilled to the West Asia and the work of oil boom. Voluntary trends and conditions are determined by the labor market, predominantly male. This is what has happened. In fact, now there is a lot of second migration from the Gulf into again the Western countries to various new destinations, including Europe, US, Australia, constitute students, professionals. Post 65 have more to do with an American pull rather than the Indian push factor, though the pull and push works simultaneously. For example, what Gurpreet was talking about, the Punjab youth going abroad, was because there was a big drug problem in Punjab. The industry was not there. In fact, a lot of socioeconomic factors went down. Education was a problem, and the youth typically and a whole lot of families got indebted. There was a study done by Punjab Agricultural College that today Punjab is in debt of almost 10,000 crores in terms of migration. All these youngsters, people wanted their children to migrate because of the drug problem and so on, so forth. The reason for Indian immigration post 65 have to do with the lifestyle and aspirations are similar to general Americans. CEOs and top positions occupied by Indians in the US. Right from Google to Microsoft to Adobe are Indians. So they have improved their not only their social position, their economic position, and their political. So today, if they are heading companies, they are able to call the shots worldwide. Okay, I think we have okay. Summing up, mobility studies in an emergent interdisciplinary field explains dynamic relation between combined movement of bodies, objects, and ideas. Migration studies emphasize quantitative movements of people across political borders, exclude dynamic relation between the movement of people, objects, and ideas, or in consideration of power or discourses. So, migration studies purely looking at how the bodies are moving, where they are moving, why are they moving, and so on and so forth. Social mobility, one class of status to another, economic mobility, economic well-being changes over time, political means involvement in decision making, directly or indirectly impacted by migration. If people migrate to other places or countries voluntarily, for likelihood for promote better socio-economic and political mobility in the long run. There are two references in Europe, mobility, immobility. So this is the paper that I was quoting, Mobility, Immobility and Migration, Ronald Skeldon in the Palgrave Handbook of International Development. Okay, I think I'm done. Let me stop sharing. Let me switch on my video and see if the video works. Okay, hi guys. Any questions? I hope I was able to, put across the mobility versus migration discourse. Any questions? Very old references. Are there any new references? King Edward Seven Seas Cruise Tourism. Okay, here's 2004. Would you have any new references you would like to share? I'm not sure if my voice is going any new. So more often than not, as I said, most of the PPT I make out of the SLMs that will you have or will be given to you. In case you have not received the SLM, the self-learning module, you can download it from the net. I think eGyan Kosh has these SLMs. More often than not, remember when SLMs are made, it takes time for them to make, and then whoever is the author, based on where they take the references, obviously there's a lot of work which has happened in between, and that is the reason why. Guys, are you able to hear my voice?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is the reason why it's very important. Old professors always come with old references. Okay, thank you very much. Uh, uh, Inevitably, the references are not mine. I'm definitely an old professor, but the references are not mine. I'm picking up from the SLM. So in case there are new ones, to share it, with each other on your group, so that it is constantly updated. Any questions, guys?
Not a question,
Okay, Chong.
but yeah, just an observation. So migration studies is more from, is it more from the lens, like is it more Western centric? Because I'm getting that kind of feeling right now.
Chong, in fact, mobility studies is also Western centric if you look at it that way. So more often than not, how these studies would be defined or come about is the fact that certain scholars would have looked at the fact, and as I explained it to you in migration studies, remember when a person moves, migration is also movement. So when a person moves, it is not just a body which moves. There is
Yeah.
an identity which moves, there are ideas which move, there are objects which move. Mobility studies looks at all these things, whereas migration is just looking at the bodies which are moving without looking at the power inequalities, the power structures, and so on and so forth. So essentially, when scholars who were doing working in the realm of migration thought that there are much more than just the movement of people from one place to another, what we call as homeland to hostland, we have to look at other things in terms of people who are not mobile, or who are capable of mobility but are not moving. They all put this under mobility studies.
Uh,
Dipti, just a minute, I'll come to you. Chong?
no, yeah, sir, got it. Uh, so when you said everything is hierarchical, so it seems even in mobility studies it's hierarchical because it gives more importance to the Western lens.
Chong, inevitably, all societies are hierarchical. There is inequality in all societies. There is an unequal distribution of resources, power, etc.
Yeah.
Now,
But
so inevitably, as I said, people who would be doing migration studies looked at the fact that it's not just the bodies which are moving, but if you want to study what are the various inequalities, how are these people moving with their ideas or with objects, they created this new interdisciplinary study called the mobility studies. More often than not, both mobility and migration are looking at bodies moving.
yeah, okay.
So,
Yeah, sir, got
okay,
it.
okay. Yes, Deepti. Deepti?
Sir, are the mobility, migration, and diaspora the same terms?
So, okay, they are three different terms. So more often than not, the way it is defined, migration involves mobility. Correct, Deepti?
Yes.
Okay. Migration studies is looking at the way people are moving, where they are moving, what routes they are taking, what is happening to those people. Mobility studies is looking at much more than just the people, but objects which are moving around, ideas which are moving around, who is moving, who is not moving. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, when these people move, let's say they move from India to US and they stay in US for a certain period of time without intending to come back, they become what we call diaspora. The term diaspora is to scatter. Like the
Ah,
plant seeds scatter,
yes.
the term diasporas is to scatter. So inevitably, when diaspora studies came about, it was that all these people scattered throughout the world. Now to
Mhm.
see what they are doing out there. So there are three different studies.
बिकॉज सर मैंने डायस्पोरा और एंडेंजर लेबर पर पीएचडी किया है।
अच्छा,
मेरा जो टॉपिक था सर दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी से किया है।
ओके,
भारतीय डायस्पोरा, अनुबंधित श्रमिक, भारतीय संस्कृति और हिंदी साहित्य लेखन। तो उसमें
ओके।
मोबिलिटी वर्ड कहीं नहीं आया था, तो इसलिए मैं थोड़ा सा। हाँ जी।
Deepti, mobility is a new field which has come about. So, as I said, academics में क्या होता है, and you would understand it, more often than not, scholars will come about and say, this particular niche needs to be studied. And when
Okay.
more and more people start studying that, then they will form this as a separate subject.
Okay.
ठीक है। तो
Okay, sir.
वो उसमें जैसे मैं गुरप्रीत को एग्जांपल दे रहा था, गुरप्रीत इज नॉट देयर। पुलिस का काम सिर्फ लॉ एंड ऑर्डर का होता है,
हाँ
बट
हाँ
पुलिस को हर चीज के लिए, पुलिस को पानी नहीं आ रहा है या कोई टंकी पे चढ़ गया तो पुलिस को बुला लेते हैं, जो उनका काम नहीं है।
हाँ
तो वो
जी
एक्सटेंशन ओवर रीच होता है।
ओके हाँ हाँ
Similarly, academics may there is an overreach. So then, when enough scholars say that, oh, this migration studies is not looking at this particular aspect, let's form. और तभी जैसे for example, there is this new term which is called transnationalism.
यस हाँ जी हाँ
अब अब डायस्पोरा स्टडीज के साथ साथ ट्रांसनेशनल स्टडीज आ रहा है। सो पीपल आर नॉट लुकिंग एट, पीपल आर जो इनिशियली इंडेंचर्ड लेबर में वंस अ पर्सन was picked up and sent to, let's say, Trinidad, there was
हाँ जी
no chance of that Indian to come back because there was
हाँ
no globalization, no transportation.
हाँ
So
यस
वो
सर
डायस्पोरा स्टडीज में हो गया, but now people go there and come back, go there and come back.
हाँ
So what, and they are not just going there and come back, they are moving to third countries and fourth countries, or
फोर्थ
their
कंट्री
children are going to a
यस
fifth country.
हाँ जी
That has come under transnational studies.
यस जैसे सूरीनाम के सर लोग
So
हॉलैंड चले गए हैं
the point,
हाँ जी
correct, absolutely,
हाँ
absolutely. And in fact, a lot of people in Suriname or Senegal or other places would not even call themselves Indians. They will say that I'm from Suriname,
हाँ हाँ सर वो अपने आप को
forgetting
कहते
the
हैं इंडो
fact that a lot
सरनामी
of them are endangered Indians.
हाँ जी दे आर इंडो सरनामी इंडो ट्रिनिडाडियन इंडो
Correct.
गयानीज
नहीं नहीं, वो इंडो भी नहीं, कभी कभी यूज कर दे ना। Correct. A lot of them don't want to use the Indian name also because that puts them into a different light altogether.
हाँ हाँ यस सर
Okay.
ओके
So,
थैंक यू सर
so understand one thing. At the end of the day, mobility and migration is the same. Deepti, mobility and migration is the same in the actual sense of the word. Any other question, guys? Okay. In case there is no question, we have come to the end of the class. Next week onwards, we pick up the SLMs on diaspora and media, and we will look at the films and the newspapers. How do they work in terms of migration and diaspora? Have a nice weekend. Have a nice week ahead, and hopefully next week we will know about a new government in this country. And we'll see each other on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Bye, guys.
Thank you, sir.